All right, we have this question here. Let me just read it out. For the following firm, total revenue and total cost functions of a firm. Oh, so for the following total revenue and total cost functions of a firm, remember the total revenue function is just showing you the relationship between the revenue that you make and the quantity you produce. So that's what this TR is telling us. So the relationship between the total revenue and the quantity we produce. Then the total cost function shows the relationship between the total cost and the quantity. So determine the level of output at which the firm maximizes its total profit, and then determine the maximum profit that the firm could earn. So from economists, the profit maximization rule is when marginal cost equals marginal revenue. Marginal just means addition. So marginal cost, the additional cost you incur when you make an extra unit. Marginal revenue, the additional revenue you incur when you make an extra unit. So what we are supposed to know is that marginal revenue is the derivative of total revenue. So what I mean when I say the derivative, the derivative is just the rate of change. Okay. If you are given total revenue, for example, if you're given total revenue, let's say I've got this function, uh, q q to the power 2, okay, then you want to get the marginal revenue. You derive this function. If you remember differentiation, the principles, the exponent multiplied by the coefficient is 1, so there 2 times 1, that is 2. And the exponent is subtract a 1, it means 2 minus 1, that is 1. So we have a marginal revenue of 2q. So each time you make an extra unit, if you make 1 unit, you substitute the 1 for q here. The, ex- the extra revenue you make is 2 units. If you make 2 units, the extra revenue 4 kwacha. If you make 3 units, you just be substituting the number of units here with q, and it will be telling you the extra revenue you make for each unit that you produce. All right. That's what we mean when we say marginal revenue is the rate of change of total revenue. And the rate of change is simply called the derivative. All right. If you make 1 unit, in this case here, the total revenue is 2 kwacha. If you make the second extra unit, when you move from 1 unit to 2 units, the extra revenue you make is 4 kwacha. We just substituted 2 for q here. Just like that. So, using that logic, we need to derive both of these functions. Okay, we need to get the derivatives of both of these functions. All right, so we'll start with the total revenue function and the total cost function. So for the total revenue, we have to get the marginal revenue, which is the derivative. So meaning you need to derive. So we say marginal revenue. We're going to write this d tr dq. What this is telling us is we are finding the rate of change of total revenue with respect to q. That's when you see the d tr dq. So meaning the variable in this case is q. So we're going to use differentiation to get our marginal revenue. So we start with this 22q here. This is 22q to the power 1. So when you're deriving the exponent 1 multiplied by the coefficient 22, 1 times 22, that is 22. Then the same exponent, you subtract a 1 from the same exponent. Okay, 1 minus 1, that is 0. So q to the power 0. Okay, we remain with 22, q to the power 0. Now, if you remember from mathematics, anything to the power 0 is 1. So you don't need, yes, yes. You don't need to show that q to the power 0. Minus, we now go to this negative half q squared, all right? Or we'll say half q squared. We've already put the minus here. So 2 exponent multiplied by coefficient, 2 times half, that is 1. Subtract a 1 from here. 2 minus 1, that is 1. So you remain with 1q. So our marginal revenue is 22 minus q. Are we okay with this? Any questions before we now derive total cost? Good evening. You're going to see it with this total cost one here. The same principle. So as I said, when you are deriving, you're going to go through each term one by one. Each term, you derive each term. All right. So we start with this one 1 over 3 q to the power 3. So when you're deriving, you multiply the exponent, the power, multiplied by the coefficient. 3 times 1 over 3, you get 1, right? Then the same exponent, you're going to subtract a 1 from it. 3 minus 1, that is 2. So we remain with q to the power 2. Minus, we go to the next term, 8.5 q squared. The exponent, 2 times 8.5, that is 17. You subtract 1 from the exponent, 2 minus 1, that is 1. So we have 17q. Plus, here we have 50q to the power 1. You multiply the exponent by the coefficient. 1 times 50, that is 50. And you subtract 1 from the exponent. 1 minus 1, that is 0. Q to the power 0, that is 1. Then if there's a number without any variable, okay, in this case, if there's a number which doesn't have a q, it disappears. Okay, it disappears. So this 90 disappears. And colleagues, you know the good thing about it? You don't have to show how this 90 disappears, all right? You don't. It just disappears. Yes. Any questions? So we found our marginal cost function and our marginal revenue function. So before I go any further and apply the profit maximization rule, where we have to equate marginal cost to marginal revenue, are there any questions? So here, basically, what we're going to find, Using this profit maximization, we're going to find the quantity that we need to produce to maximize our profit. Okay, because if it's important to know what quantity you need to produce to maximize your profit. Remember, in the firm, you need to make decisions. This is what managerial economics is about, making decisions. And one of the decisions you would want to make for the firm is maximizing profit. Okay, that is just one of the decisions which you would be very interested in doing for any firm. So we equate marginal cost to marginal revenue. So now we are going back to algebra. So marginal cost here we have q squared minus 17q plus 50 equals our marginal revenue 22 minus q. So if you remember from algebra, we have to group like terms together, right? So in this case here, you can decide which one you want to cross the equal sign. So since here we've got a nice quadratic equation here, so these in red, we're going to cross them over the equal sign. So we're going to have q squared minus 17q and this negative q here, we take it over the equal sign so it becomes positive. So negative 17q plus q plus 50 this positive 22, when it crosses the equal sign, becomes negative minus 22. Equals 0. So negative 17q plus q, we get negative 16q. So we have q squared minus 16q 50 minus 22, we get 28 plus 28. Now, before I go any further, any questions? All right. So now we're dealing with quadratic equations. Remember, with quadratic equations, okay, you have to find A, B, and C. A is the coefficient of q squared, B is the coefficient of q, C is the constant. So A is 1, B is negative 16, C is 28. Now, if you are very well versed with quadratic equations, you don't need to do what I'm doing here. Okay. So once you find your A, B, and C, you're just going to say A multiplied by C, the coefficient of Q squared multiplied by the constant, the number without any Q. So that is 1 times 28. You get 28. So now with this 28 that we've got, we have to find two factors of 28. That when you multiply them, okay, two factors of 28, that when you multiply them, they should give you positive 28. And when you add them, they should give you negative 16. So colleagues, what are those two factors? When you multiply them, they should give you positive 28. When you add them, they give you negative 16. So those two factors are negative 2 and 14. Negative 14. Negative 2 and negative 14. If you multiply negative 2 by negative 14, you get positive 28. If you add negative 2 with negative 14, you get negative 16. So we found our two factors, negative 2 and 14. So you're going to write Q minus, open brackets, Q minus 2, close brackets, open brackets, Q minus 14, close brackets, equals 0. Q minus 2, Q minus 14 equals 0. So we equate Q minus 2 to 0 and Q minus 14 to 0. Okay. It's taking long to show when I write here. No, why it's lagging like this. Yes. So you're going to do Q minus 2 equals 0. Q minus 14 equals 0. And you'll find that Q minus 2 equals 0. That gives you positive 2. Q minus 14 equal to 0 give you 14. So here, since there are two quantities, you go with the larger quantity. Okay. There are two quantities here. There's Q equals 2 and Q equals 14, because we are the quadratic equation here. So you're going to pick the larger one. And you're going to say, when we produce 14 units, we maximize our profit. So when we produce 14 units, this firm is going to maximize its profits. Yes. Any questions as I'm waiting for the writings to show on the board? Yes. So at Q equals 14, that's when we maximize profit, all right? That's when we maximize profit. Okay. Yes. It's talking all scribbled. Let me put it proper. Yes, colleagues, any questions as I'm putting everything in order? Don't want it to look too scribbled here. Any questions? So we've solved the first part of the equation. We found the quantity at which the firm maximizes profit, and that quantity is 14 units. Okay. Usually, if you see I've been given a quadratic equation, you always pick the higher. Yes, yes. This q squared. After you find the two factors, all right. After you found the two factors, -2 and -14, the next step is to just, have you seen this way I've written q minus 2, q minus 14? You forget about that q squared. It's gone from there. After you find the two factors, just put them in brackets like this. This is q minus 2, since one of the factors is -2, and q minus 14. And you equate both to 0. Then when you equate both to 0, you solve each of them individually. Okay, you solve each of them individually. Q minus 2 equals 0, Q equals 2. Q minus 14 equals 0, Q equals 14. Is that okay, madam? For you forget about it. Its purpose has gone. Moment you found the two factors of your number, you forget that one. It goes, okay? Yes, but the significance of this two here tells you that you'll be given two answers. If it was to the power 3, you get three answers. If it's to the power 4, you get four answers. Okay. Yes. Oh, then the next part is the one find what is the profit that we get. All right, one find what is the profit that we're going to get, the maximum profit that we get. So so if you remember, profit equals total revenue minus total cost. Now the way my board is lagging behind, when I write, I have to wait for it to show. So what you're supposed to do, since you have found the quantity q equals 14, this q equals 14, you, you substitute it into the total revenue function and the total cost function. Okay, because once you substitute q equals 14 into the total revenue function, it will give you the total revenue you make when you make 14 units. And once you substitute q equals 14 into the total cost function, it will give you the total cost that you incur when you make 14 units. Then total revenue minus total cost, that is your profit. Now, since my board is lagging, so maybe what we can do here, let's look at these, the total revenue and the total cost functions. So, colleagues, in the total revenue function, which is 22q minus half q squared, if we substitute 14 in there, what do we get? In this total revenue function, if you substitute q with 14, what do we get as our total revenue? And after that, you substitute 14 into the total cost function. Where there's Q, you replace it with 14. 210, okay. That's our total revenue. Okay, then now let's go to our total cost function. Where there is Q, substitute it with 14. So 1 over 3, 14 cubed minus 8.5, 14 squared plus 50 times 14 plus 9. Your total cost. I'll tell me what the total cost is. What I will get as our total cost, total revenue. Let's see. Got what? Yes, has anyone got the total cost? Hey, we haven't found the total cost yet.
Score.
38.67. Colleagues, let's okay, colleague 38.67. Let me also try to confirm here on my thing. On the calculator for 14 cubed divided by 3. So when we do this first part here, we substitute Q 14 cubed 2744 divided by 3, you get 914 minus 8.5 times 14 squared. You get minus 751. Or when you subtract these two, you get negative 751. 914 minus 8.5 times 14 times 14, you get negative 751. Then negative 751 plus 50 times 14, get negative 51 plus 90. Yes, 38.6, madam. That's correct. 38.6 quach. That's the total cost. So to get your profit, your total revenue 210 minus 38.6. So that the board is lagging. Each time I write, I have to wait for the things to appear. So, but at least it's doing this on the easy part of the question. So 210 minus 38.6. 171.4. Okay, profit is total revenue minus total cost. 210 minus 38.6, 171.4. Yes, that's that with the question. If you've got any questions, you can ask the question.